The idea that organizations run themselves is not real. People run organizations. And if any change is going to start, it always starts with you.
Welcome to The Change Effect, the podcast that helps you turn life transitions into powerful new beginnings. One story, one shift, one breakthrough at a time. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, leadership coach, and change strategist who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders break through barriers to create success on their own terms. I now work with women to step into change to create a life they love. Whether you're putting yourself at the center of your own story, redefining success, or making a power pivot in your life, career, or business, you're in the right place. Each week, we dive into conversations with trailblazers, changemakers, and everyday women experiencing the ripple effects that come from overcoming the fear and doing it anyway, providing actionable steps, practical strategies, and a whole lot of fun along the way. So if you're ready to step up and become unstoppable, buckle up and let's get started. Lately, you've heard me talk about the Great Breakup, a growing movement of women leaders leaving successful careers in corporate to step into a more aligned way of living and working. The reasons for leaving range from burnout to a desire for greater agency and a growing refusal to stay in environments that feel performative or disconnected from the impact they want to create in the world. Now, this is being recognized as a time where more women leaders are leaving their corporate roles than any other time in history. This is a movement that's gaining momentum, and to me, it speaks volumes. This reflects not only a pivot in how women see themselves and their contributions, but a broader cultural, even paradigm-level shift in how women are redefining success on their own terms. That's why I created a new mini-series on the change effect called Pros Who Pivot, where we share conversations with women who have successfully navigated this transition and have found greater freedom and fulfillment on the other side. Now, if you're feeling the pull towards something new or leaving your own corporate role and are interested in stepping into a discreet and supportive space with other women who are ready to gain momentum and take action, I'm offering an exclusive opportunity for a small group of women to come together and make that happen. If this calls to you, click the link in the show notes and let's connect. With that said, I hope you enjoy the series. Turning points rarely arrive on our timeline. For Lou Panzano, everything shifted after losing her brother too soon. On the flight home from his funeral, one truth became undeniable. Life is too short not to spend it with the people you love most. She turned to her husband and said, "I think I want to retire now." It wasn't the plan. She had 2 more years mapped out in a demanding executive communications career, but burnout was creeping closer. With the relentless pressure of leading crisis communications through COVID, the restructuring that left her reporting to a new boss with even higher expectations, and the exhaustion of pouring herself into work that no longer fed her soul, her brother's death gave her the clarity and permission to choose differently. So after a successful 40-year corporate career that included senior leadership roles at Prudential, Pfizer, and Bayer, Lou stepped away from her role as VP of Internal Communications to focus on what she loves most: helping people navigate change and prosper. Today, she's a certified leadership coach, communications advisor, speaker, and best-selling author. She is a featured author in Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 18, and her solo book, Cementing Change, Cracking the Code for Communications That Work, will be published in 2026. Lou is a wife, stepmother of 2 adult children, and a proud grandmother. She lives in New Jersey with her husband and her German Shepherd, Bruno. Lou, it is so wonderful to have you here with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Noelle. And I appreciate being here. It's an honor. Thank you.
Of course. And Lou, looking at your background, I have many, many questions up front. But what I wanted to ask you first really is to give us just a little bit of maybe your background.
I'll start with high school because that was a pivotal move for me. I was planning all my life to go to college and get a degree in education. And I remember the summer before my senior year in high school, I was sitting at the kitchen table looking at electives, and they were all college prep electives. And my mom walked in and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm picking my courses for next year for the upcoming senior year." She said, "This teaching thing, I really respect teachers and I respect what you want to do, but for some reason you have acquired champagne taste and teachers make a beer salary. You're never going to be happy being a teacher on that kind of a salary." So I thought she was crazy. And then she invited me to come visit with her to Prudential long before take your kids to work day was a thing. And she said, "Come and meet the executive secretaries at Prudential. They're aligned with the top leaders of the organization. They know things most people will never know. They have a lot of power and influence, and they live very prosperous lives. So I was like, Mom, no offense, I don't want to be a secretary. But to appease her, I went anyway. And that led to my starting my career as a secretary at Prudential, interestingly enough, after having attended Catherine Gibbs, which at the time was not a university. It became a university, but it was the #1 secretarial school in the country. I cut a deal with my mom that I was going to go to that school only if I could go for 2 years and get a liberal arts degree, so that I could leave there with an associate's degree level so I could go on to college after I get a job and become a teacher.
So you were going to get there. Any way you could, you were going to get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I learned there, Noelle, interestingly, was that I had a knack for and a great interest in communications. Secretaries at the time were taught that you represent your leader's office. You're going to be writing letters and memoranda and reports for them. So you need to learn how to string a sentence together. You need to learn how to proofread. You need to learn business communications. I don't know if I would have understood that had I gone straight to college. But after several years at Prudential, I applied for a role as a manager of communications in law department. And that began a 30+ year in employee communications.
That is so crazy. I love stories like that because it feels very serendipitous. But also, what's funny is you are probably the third person I've talked to more recently where they've talked about an adult in their life redirecting them at a time where they were like, I'm on this path, and having this sort of redirection happen. And I just find that fascinating because when you think about the years that you're talking about, right, you're in a very impressionable stage at that point, but it was almost like planting that seed right at the right time to then have you kind of go, oh, wait, I love that. Now tell us about your career. I know you have an amazing career. So how did you kind of come up through the ranks, and what were some of the more pivotal moments for you?
I think it was interesting in the secretarial space because I started in the employee benefits division when I started at Prudential. And Prudential was one of the few companies that when I interviewed with had the most benefits, the most opportunity. My mom worked there, how bad could it be? But it was interesting because I really looked at the company as a place where I could grow and develop. And the company had a terrific reimbursement program for tuition as long as it was on plan with things you were going to be doing in the organization. So all of those things made it appealing for me to want to be there. Besides, it was a nice salary and benefits. But what was interesting is I started as a secretary, and within 14 months of my being there, I had an opportunity to apply for a job at the next level. And it was working for the corporate secretary of the company, who was the only female at the time in the executive suite.
Love it.
And her name was Isabel L. Kirchner. She went by Billy. And she was an incredible role model, but she was a trailblazer in the company. And I met her when I was in the employee benefits department because I would have to go to her office and she would sign the plans, like the benefits plans.
Yes.
And she had this huge office on the 23rd floor. I mean, it was just like so impressionable to me. And I thought, God, I'd love to work for her someday. And that happened. 14 months later, I applied, and I didn't think I was qualified enough to be able to win that role, because other women had been there for years who would have wanted that role. But I was urged by somebody else in the company to apply for it. And I did. Like, one of the associate managers there said, you should apply for the job. If you don't get it, you don't get it. But what if you do? So I applied for it, and she selected me. And that then got me a lot of exposure and opportunity to again, learn, develop, grow, test things out with the executive team and with the board of directors, like with the top people in the organization. And I'm not a year and a half into my
But that's what blows me away, because when you think about that, I mean, think of how long typically it takes for someone in a career to move up to that, where you're going to start being in a room where you can actually even just absorb, right? It's even just like being around that energy, and to have that early in your career, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really something. And I think that through that, again, I had another manager at one point who said, I think you're tapped out here. I've been talking with a couple of people. There's a role in the residential real estate group that I think you'd be interested in. And I said, okay. And I looked at the role, and I met the vice president of operations there, and I applied for the job, and I got the job. Then I was exposed to another part of the business. So it wasn't the corporate functions, it was the business side. So that gave me a different kind of experience there. Came with a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the administrative management piece came in. Because now I had, two people reporting to me, and now I had to learn how to be a manager and those types of things, which were new skills that I was learning to develop at that stage. And then it was then that I had met someone who was in the law department, was one of the paralegals that we worked with. And she introduced me. She said, we were very good friends. We just worked together. She was supporting our business unit. And she mentioned to me that there was a role on the posting board for a manager in human resources in the law department. And I said, well, I don't know if I really want to do human resources, but I'll take a look at it. So I looked at the role description and I thought, first of all, I really don't think I'm qualified, which is something I've said to myself many times. And it was very interesting because sometimes you just have the self-doubt, and the self-doubt is, I don't think I'm qualified enough. Throughout my career, I've heard that men rarely say that. They'll look at a role description, and as long as one of the things works for them, they'll say, I'll apply for it. But women have to have 9 out of 10 or they won't even consider it, right?
Completely.
But right next to that role description for the human resources job was the manager of communications role description. And I looked at that one and I thought, well, now that sounds interesting. Writing a newsletter for the department, looking at survey data, helping the organization with its strategies. And I thought I could do things like that. I can write, I can create a speech for the general counsel. I can do those things. So I applied for that role. And that role, again, I wasn't so sure I was qualified for it. I didn't have communications as a background in my education, but it was something I did. Mm-hmm. And it was a very interesting job interview. It was more of a conversation than it was really an interview. And I thought, I'm never going to get this role. A few days later, I was offered the position. I was kind of surprised that I got the role, but it was a promotion. It was the first time I'd have an office with a window. I thought, gosh, this could be a cool thing, right? And I applied for the role. And then that's when I learned how much I did not know about communication strategy work.
And that was where the education began?
Yeah, and it was fire hose. It was a fire hose. I mean, you can't tell on screen, and you don't know me well enough, Noelle, to know that I stand 6'1". Wow. So
okay.
I feel like I'm in over my head. It's not twice as much as what most people can handle, right?
But so, I mean, because I think of, and having been in HR for most of my career, when I think of communications, I always think of crisis management. I don't know why, because I always would partner with the communications person, right? Because it's always about how are we messaging this out and how's it going to land? Yeah. But did you find, how did you adopt that skill set, that sensibility about the nuance around communication? Because I always think there's some of us have it, right? Where you probably are somebody that can kind of go 4 steps ahead of, you know what I mean? You can see a piece of communication and realize, okay, this is how it's going to land, but then these are the repercussions or the possible questions that might come up, or you're always looking around the corners, I would imagine, which is a really unique skill, I think.
I appreciate that, Noelle. And I think one of the things that I learned over time was that I'm not just writing the communications or developing the strategy for the communications. I'm also the audience. I work here too.
Yes.
So as I think about what questions would other employees have, I think about the questions that I would have. And one of the most important things in communications, and I think it applies in the HR function as well, is really knowing your audience. Yes. Being out there, and if not just you and your team, having tentacles all across the organization and listening out for what are people talking about? What are people concerned about? What are people excited about? What are people questioning in terms of strategic decisions in the organization? That listening part is probably the most important skill that communicators bring to the table, because more often than not, we're going to ask the question that no one else in the room is going to ask. Mm-hmm. Because either they don't think it needs to be asked, or they don't even realize it's a question on people's minds, or they're afraid to bring it up.
Well, and I think what's really a big call out there too is communication has so much to do. There's the elements that you just described, but then there's also that what's going to happen to me? I mean, that's like the most basic thing, right? It's like a personal question for people and people that are going through things outside of their work and all like I think those are those touch points that are really valuable to think about. And oftentimes, corporations want to just go for the work related issue. And this is what we're going to put out there. And COVID has taught us this 10 times over, right? People have lives and people have personal fears and anxieties, and people had a hard time getting in work today. And, just things like that I think it's that human side of it within the corporate structure that's really, really unique to have, because you have to have those touch points and you have to be able to see that those things are going to be coming top of mind for people.
It's really interesting. And I'm so glad that you raised that, because most people don't realize that most employees, especially in larger organizations, have a very strong affiliation with the company, whether it's related to the products, the services, the people they work with. Most have a best friend at work. Some have family members at work. And so they're going about doing their day job as best as they can. And then the organization comes in and disrupts it. It's, as if you had a teenage daughter and you walk in the room and you start cleaning up their clothes and moving things around and trying to straighten out. And your goal is to get the dirty clothes for the laundry. And they walk in behind you and they're like, Mom, like, what are you doing? Don't mess with my stuff. Like, you can imagine employees are like, don't mess with my stuff. Like, you just, made a change that's going to affect my friend or my family or me. Or now there's a new process I have to learn. And now there's a new policy I have to follow, or whatever it is. And the other thing I found it interesting in researching for my book is that especially larger companies, but even mid-sized companies, are sending changes across the wire to employees at an incredibly rapid pace. And most of them have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 changes going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then, as you said, and then they go home. And then life happens to them. And this notion of change fatigue, or this ability to kind of grapple with all of that and still be feeling productive, is really, really a challenge. So as leaders go into these change efforts, I think one of the things that communicators have an advantage around is, more often than not, they have a view of the organization that most functions don't. They can not only tell what's going on in division A, B, and C, but they know what the corporate organization is trying to do. They know what the corporate functions are trying to do. And a lot of times those things are like arrows darting across at employees at the same time. And communicators usually have a unique perspective on that, because it's like, wait a minute, if you make this change over here and you announce it on this day, did you know that these other 3 things are happening?
It's a synchronicity.
Yeah.
And you bring up the point too of outside of work, and I would venture to say even the past 2+ years, look at our political climate. There is something new happening every hour. Mm-hmm. It's overload.
It is overload. And I've had my experience of being, more than once in my career, being the person who is responsible for some of that overload, because we're trying to get messaging out and communications out to people. And without with the data and the research that you can do internally, without the surveys, without the listening, without the watching what people are posting in terms of comments and remarks on intranet articles or Slack or whatever tools they're using, you get blinded to all of it. Like, you don't really understand the pulse and the mood in the organization. And you raised this point around, what's going on in the political environment, the societal environment. People do not leave their hearts and heads at home when they come to work. Like, they bring their whole body, they bring all their emotions, they bring all of that weight with them. And if organizations don't give people an opportunity to express their views, to talk about things, to have healthy dialogue around things, they're missing the opportunity to really have that kind of connection with employees that is so critical to whatever they're trying to do. People like to be engaged and involved in helping find solutions, but as leaders, you also have to be transparent about what the real problem is.
This is what strikes me too, is in your line of work, and once again, I feel a little aligned to that because I have a similar trajectory in my career in terms of being very close to the pulse of people's emotions all the time. And you're helping to kind of get those messages out in such a way that I feel, and this is my own personal opinion, you tell me what you think. In our line of work, when you get up there in your career and you are now at the top of your game. Did you get a sense or a feel or a shift? Because you're close to the heartbeat. Did you feel at any time that there was a misalignment there? Like I know that, and we're going to talk a little bit about your decision to retire when you did, but you had a very full career. Are there ever any turning points that you really recognize from an internal perspective, right? From like a value system, or were there ever times that you felt like I'm here and I'm being the voice of something and it's contradicting, or it's maybe not in direct alignment? Because I just feel like you're very close to that. And it's not like I'm doing design work over here in the creative department and I'm going to wait to hear what's going on in the organization. You're in a different proximity, I guess, to that type of internal exposure to things, I guess, that others maybe aren't as close to.
Let me share an example to see if this aligns with where you're heading with this. A number of years ago, we had participated in the annual sales meeting for our organization. And this is the meeting that sets the tone and sets the direction and the strategy for the sales organization for all of, the work that they're going to be doing for the rest of the year. And one of those meetings was held in Las Vegas, Nevada. There was an altercation with one of our sales managers at the bar with somebody who didn't work for the company. And I don't know what the altercation was about. I was never privy to it. But what wound up happening was that the president made a unilateral decision without a whole lot of fact finding and discovery, if you will, to fire that individual. Now, that individual had recently been showcased as one of our top performing sales managers in a video that we had recently done around the strategy we were rolling out for the organization, a new vision, that whole type of thing. And he was literally dismissed from the organization. And the president also wanted to make an example of him. And he wanted to get a message out to the organization that that behavior is not condoned and that we took swift and immediate action to deal with the situation. So now my head was saying, of course, we have rules. You have to follow rules. You have to behave like when you are out. And if there's somebody, giving you a hard time, take the high road, walk away, right? Well, that didn't happen. I don't think it was a physical altercation, but I think there was noise at the bar where people are going, this is the way bear people react type of thing. I don't know, but that was the rumor mill behind the story. So now in my heart, that was not the right decision. In my heart, this was, let's talk to the guy. Let's figure out what really happened. Let's understand what the situation was. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some sort of consequences, because I believe with everyone's actions should come with some sort of consequence, and that we could have easily reminded employees of what our policy is around how we behave when we're at events like this. We had a very differing point of view about how to handle it. Now, I was the one who released his message, but he would not let me influence the message. And that really, really did not sit well with me at all. And it really bothered me, because I thought, on the one hand, I felt like it was my job to push against it. I did, but I didn't do a good enough job of it. My manager was not necessarily supportive. She said, let him do what he wants to do, because he's not going to change his mind. I thought, well, gosh, that's awful. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that there would be a better way to handle the situation that would achieve both the, let's get the message out about what we expect of our employees. Let's remind them of that. And then let's handle the situation with the manager, the sales manager and his manager, and figure out what happened and just get really underneath it. So that was just one situation that came to mind, Noelle, when you mentioned like when a personal value system or belief system or a way of doing something that I felt would have been more effective and sort of led more from the heart than from the head.
Yes.
Would have had a better effect, a better impact overall.
It reminds me of like how many times in our careers where you'd be in a place where you'd be like, am I playing that game? Whatever that game is, where it's like, what would be the right thing to do? Like choose A, choose B, or choose C. What would you do? That type of thing. And I think it just, and this drives home to me once again, what you had just said about there is something about, and I'm going to sound terrible saying this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think women have a way, we see the nuance of situations sometimes that others don't. I feel that way very strongly. And so when being put in positions like that, which is part of your role, and we get that, and we've done it 1,000 times, it's not like it's that big of a deal. But I think there is a little bit of a wearing away. And I only speak to my own, this is once again, my experience more. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that can chip away at, and it's not even a feeling of safety because it's not like your job is on the line in any way, but there is a feeling that there's kind of an end of a sentence at certain times and you have to kind of back off. And I don't know necessarily that men to men that would happen as much, but for women, we take a little bit of the step back at times when we know, like intuitively, we know that's the right thing to do. And probably the other answer wouldn't have made sense. But I think that there is something about that as you describe it, and especially in the role that you played, where I could see that feeling, I don't know, it's just feel contradictory at times.
I feel kind of blessed that I haven't had too many situations in my career where I have felt so malaligned with where I work and what I was asked to be doing.
Which is great. That's a great testament to where you worked too.
Now, questionable in terms of approach, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, and it's funny that you said sort of how men might handle a situation like this and how women might. I think that was the first year that man was in the president's role of that organization, or maybe the second year, and I was not directly supporting him for all that much time. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, I had a different posturing myself, not only in the organization, but with what I would go to bat for and what I would stand up for and what I would fight for in terms of what we were doing around communications. And with that same person, number of years later, we were notified that I was signed the confidentiality agreement that we were closing one of our sites, which at one point had been the corporate headquarters for the US business for Bear. And it was essentially the first of a couple of shoes that would be dropping as a result of an acquisition. And I got notified a few days before the Christmas holidays, before the year-end holiday break, that this was happening the third week of January. So my first thought was, crap, I've got somebody on my team in that office. How's that going to work? And then my second thought was, there goes the holidays again. I went up to him, tell him that my boss let me know what's happening in Pittsburgh. And he said, yeah, he said, this is going to be difficult. I said, yes, it will be. And he said, you should go get all of the materials that they used in Berkeley, California, a couple of months ago when they announced they were closing down one of the sites, and they did a tremendous job. I said, yeah, that's my colleague. I have all those materials. They did do a great job. But I had the courage to say, but this one's different. And he said, how so? And I said, well, this is the first one that's going to signal the first of probably many shoes to drop and site closings and other kinds of large changes related to the acquisition. And he said, oh, that's a good point. He said, we're going to have to handle this one differently. I said, let me think about it over the holidays and I'll come back to you with some ideas. And just very quickly, Noelle, one of the most important things was we wanted to make sure in that strategy, that communications plan, that our employees heard this news from us first. We had about 600 people there. And you know how the world is. You tell leaders not to share something and they're going to share it immediately, right? And so most of the top leaders who had people at that site were also impacted by this change. We were moving most of the functions were being handled by a site somewhere else in the country. It was really a tough decision. HR operations was there. Our IT data centers were there. There was a lot of corporate functional groups there. And I insisted that we not email anything to anyone to prep for this announcement. And my boss and this other guy thought I was crazy. And I said, look, we're clear about the goal. Our people hear from us first. So if we're going to do that, I promise you that as much as we trust all of these leaders, they are not going to not share this material as soon as it hits their inbox. I also fought to have my entire team there because they supported all of these leaders to make sure that they not only saw what was happening, but they heard the entire plan, the communication strategy, what we were going to do, all of the follow-on discussions and town hall meetings and staff meetings after the major town hall announcing this. And we had the media team ready to roll and everything. And even with all of that, to the point where we went through all of the materials in hard copy, at the meeting the day before the announcement, they went to Staples and printed copies and delivered them underneath everybody's doors.
Wow. Yeah.
Even with that, a few minutes before, there was a media truck out before the town hall meeting. There was a media truck outside asking questions about this announcement. So even with all of that protection, well, we were ready for that. And it happened almost simultaneously. But these are the kinds of decisions that I don't think they would have agreed to fly everybody in, have my own team there, spend all this money on hard copy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The question that this is going to be a different kind of announcement. And by the way, 6 weeks later, we did the same announcement at another site in Indiana.
Wow. Yeah.
And we ran it the same way because you just want to do something different if you want to make sure you get your goal achieved the way you want to achieve it. And sometimes you have to have the courage to do something draconian, like hard copy only.
Yes. But I think that's also a testament to your growth as a leader, right? Of understanding that, this might be inconvenient, guys, but guess what? We've seen this movie before. Let's not do that again.
Yeah.
I want to get to this turning point for you because I feel like it is near and dear to my heart, your story of how you have built this career, right? It is clear that you were very effective in what you did. Walking away from it, I'm sure, was not easy. Mm-hmm. But tell us a little bit about that point in time that you made the decision that it was going to be time to move a little bit sooner than you had anticipated.
There were a number of things sort of all compiling up in the same space for me. The COVID-19 pandemic was still in the throes of, we were trying to figure out what does next normal look for us? What does the hybrid look for us, like for us? We're still trying to protect our people in the spaces that we're in while we're figuring all of that out. That had been going on for at least a year and a half at that point. And there really was no real end in sight still in July or August of 2021. So the pressure of that being in crisis mode all of the time was just really mounting for me. We were also introducing a new strategy for the US business. And for the first time in my career, I was at that table. I was the communications person responsible for asking the questions, for challenging the things, for making sure that the strategy made sense and how we were going to talk about it and how we were going to inspire people around it. If I were doing only that, Noelle, I don't think I would have left.
Yeah.
Our corporate affairs department where I had worked was split in half. My boss's job was eliminated. And this was a boss I worked with for 7 years, who I greatly admired. And his job was split in two. He left the company and we took the communications function and put it on one side and took the rest of it, philanthropy and government relations and policy, and put it someplace else. And so now I had a new boss again. She was challenging all of the strategies that we had just finished going through, because companies are constantly going through cost savings exercises and all of this. We had just finished that in our department. That was being questioned and starting all over. I was asked to lead how the communications function was going to handle with this new hybrid. I was in charge of that for our entire function on top of my regular work. There was just all this stuff happening at work. And then my brother was not well. My older brother was only 2 years older than me, was not well. He had a debilitating disease. There was no cure for it. And he was making some progress over the summer and then had some issues and his health began to decline. And so that was weighing on my mind as well. And I didn't realize, Noelle, just how close to probably a diagnosis of severe burnout I really was. People would tell me on screen, because we weren't talking to very many people in person still at that point.
Right.
You look tired. Are you okay? And I thought, gosh, if I look tired on the screen, imagine what I look like in person, right? And I was like, nobody ever used to say that to me. So my health was just not where it used to be. And I was feeling it. So all of that happened. And then I got the call on a Friday night that my brother's health was failing. And I told my sister-in-law, I said, well, do you need me down there? She said, I think you need to come. So I flew down on Saturday morning and my brother died the next day.
Oh my God. So sorry.
Thank you. And my younger brother was there. His kids were there. We were all standing around him. I've never watched someone pass before. And it was probably the most beautiful and awful experience at the same time, honestly. But the week went by, helped my sister-in-law with all of the planning or whatever. My husband flew down on the following Friday for the services on Saturday. And then we flew home on Sunday. And I just was sitting there looking out the window, and I thought, look at what I'm going back to. Look at what I'm going back to. With the exception of the strategy work, I wasn't really energized and motivated to want to step into any of the rest of that, honestly. My husband and I had talked about our retirement planning for years with our financial planners, and it got to a point where I said, John, I really think I need to cut this string. I think I need to do this now. And he's like, Mare, are you sure? And I said, I don't know if I'm sure. I said, let's talk to our financial planner. Let's see if we can pull this string a little bit sooner than planned. I said, I just don't think I can go back to that environment anymore. Like if it were 20 years ago, I probably have the stamina, the wherewithal, and the, yes, I don't know, the aspiration to do more, be more, and all that. I'm like, I don't think I have that anymore. Life is just too short to not do the things you love the most with the people you love the most. And my brother's death just taught me that, because he never got to enjoy his retirement. He didn't do a lot of the things he always wanted to do in his life. Yes, he got married. He lived in a nice home. He had twin boys, all of that. But there were things that he always wanted to do that he never did. And I thought, I don't know, that's not fair. And I don't want that to be that person either. And the other thing is, my husband is 11 years older than me. And I thought, if we don't go out and play now while we're still healthy and have our wits about us and are in a place where we can do the things we love to do, then when is that going to be? Why wait?
And what's so great, and I don't say a lot of things are really great about being at an age that you can make that decision, right? You're close enough to retirement that you can make that decision. The great thing about that, I think, is the way that you made this decision was based on just a really profound shift in perspective. Like you said, if I was like 30 and I was still out there, I had the chutzpah and I really wanted to go show everybody what I could do. But you get to a place in your career where it's like, no, I've done it. I've shown it. And I think the turning point, and we're going to talk in a minute about what you're doing now, that turning point, it's almost like a slowdown of the machine or something, like you're going, and it's always just work. And it's almost like not even you don't feel like you're on a treadmill. Maybe you do, but you don't feel like you're until you really look back on it and go, wow, I was just doing a lot of clean up aisle 6, that's what's happening. And then once you stop that and you get to sort of choose, it's such a different energy. It's a different feeling when you wake up in the morning. When you decided to do this, which once again, the reasons behind it, are not wonderful, but it was something that pushed you into that next place. What was it like when you decided to do it once that happened? Like you get up the first morning. Was it an adjustment period? I guess this is where I'm getting at. Like, how did you step into that?
It really was an adjustment period. I don't know if this was a mistake or not, but that situation with my brother happened in August of 2021. And I spent 6 weeks deciding how I was going to communicate this. Now, I'm a communications professional.
Yes.
I should have been able to do that in 6 minutes.
But it's you.
But it's me.
You.
So I was very concerned really about my team. I wasn't concerned about my boss. I wasn't concerned about leaving the job. I wasn't concerned about, disappointing people. I was concerned about my team because we had such a great relationship, and I wanted to make sure that they would be well taken care of when I left. And I decided to make the announcement sometime end of September that I was leaving in February. So giving like 4 months. That, I would say, in retrospect, probably not the best thing to do because it was too long of a tail life for that matter. I also was very concerned about getting this strategy released as best as it could be, and I wanted to stay on the game with that. But it was very challenging. I think I had a bit of a unique situation when I retired because I left in the beginning of February, and in the middle of March, we were hosting a celebration of life for my brother in March.
Nice.
So that first couple of weeks was really all about getting all those arrangements made. And so there was a lot of focus on something completely other than work at that point. But it kept me very involved and engaged for the first, 2 months or so after I retired. My husband and I also took a trip to Utah to see 5 of the national parks, which we had planned to do in 2020, and that wasn't going to happen. So we took that trip in June of that year. So there were things sort of happening and keeping us going. And somewhere around October, it was like, okay, I think I made all the decisions I needed to make with healthcare and all this other stuff that you have to decide when you retire after 40 years in the corporate arena. So all of those decisions were made and that stuff was behind me. And now I was like, now what? Mm-hmm. So I knew like teaching, giving back, helping people learn the lessons I learned so they don't have to deal with what I dealt with throughout my career is what I wanted to do. But I didn't know what I was going to teach essentially or to whom. So I took the holidays for the first time, did not have to worry about my phone ringing and taking a laptop with me and all the other crazy things I used to do on holidays. We spent the holidays in Florida with my sister-in-law, right, who just lost her husband. And here we are, now it's January.
Yeah.
And that's when I really, after some prayer and meditation, I kept waking up thinking about this framework that I know we're going to talk about soon around change. And it just kept, this is what like go teach that. It just kept coming to me. And I was like, okay, fine. That's what I'll do. That's really how it all began. And then I opened up my LLC in February of 2023.
And the thing that is so wonderful to hear, because your background is you just have so much texture to what you have done in the past. I mean, it is. I mean, communication is a really interesting area. It's a good space to be in because it translates so well over to other people, right? It's kind of like taking all the lessons that you've learned in the corporate arena, and then how do you apply that to someone's individual life or helping them through? And I mean, you have, I'm sure, varied different client portfolios, but I'm just saying, so tell us about the 4 C's.
So the 4 C's is something that I had lived and experienced, but didn't label it or didn't name it until sometime in 2014 when I was asked to speak about the change communications program that we had run at Bayer for the previous 3 years. It was a 3-year change project. It involved, it was a $250 million investment in a new site. We were consolidating sites. It wasn't a downsizing exercise. We were just bringing 5 of our locations into one. And they were healthcare businesses that we felt really could collaborate more together. And we wanted to give employees a much better experience at the workplace. We also wanted to showcase Bayer as a serious healthcare provider in the US. And none of our sites, they were all dated. We were running out of room. It wasn't conducive for our employees, and it didn't really say this is an innovation company. Mm-hmm. So we built this new site. And so that was the biggest disrupt. That was the first big disruption. Now everybody, if you live in New York and New Jersey, you know that a 5-mile additional commute could take you a half an hour to get to work. So,
easy.
And this was before a lot of remote work. So most people were going to the office. And so that was one big change, disrupting people's sort of routines around getting to work and that type of thing. The other piece was a cultural shift because most of those people had private offices. And we made a decision about a year into the project that we were going to go to a complete open plan workspace. No private offices at any level. Now, this wasn't a big deal. This is not a big deal today, but 15 years ago, this was new. This wasn't happening. And it was the first of Bayer's offices to do this. So that's the background. That's the context. So we go through this change program. We take people through the cultural shift. We take them through the physical move. And we won some pretty prestigious awards. One of them was the Best Employee Communications Program of the Year award by Reagan Communications. So big thing up on the Jumbotron in Times Square. It was a huge,
nice.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And we were all really proud about what we did. And then I started getting invited to talk about it. And I thought, how on earth, especially to communicators, am I going to talk about a 3-year change program in 40 minutes, including Q&A, with 200 or 300 of, communications professionals and have it be easy to remember, repeatable, so they could share their teams, and actually something they could apply right away. So I made a big long list of all the things that we did. I went for a long walk and I came back and I started to circle some things that were thematically similar. And that's where the 4 C's came from. So the 4 C's change framework starts with clarity, knowing and sticking to your goal. And one of the hardest things at the beginning of that project was to get the top leaders involved in all of those sites to agree on what it was we were doing and why we were doing it and what benefit it was going to have for our employees in the organization. You would think they were aligned on that. They really weren't. So somebody had to come up with the 5 reasons why we're doing this, and that became the message platform for the following 2 years or 3 years. So the first one is clarity. The second is connection, engaging and involving others in helping you achieve your change. We talked a little bit about the importance of connection earlier. People really want to know what's going on. They want to understand how it's going to impact them. And then how are you going to help me get from current state to future state? And how can I help? How can I be part of that versus having you do something to me? Let's work through it together. The third is caring about the impact that the change is going to have on other people. It also means caring for yourself. Because what they say on an airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first because you will be of no use to anyone if you are gasping for air or worse yet, unconscious because you're trying to help other people. You need to take care of yourself, especially if you're trying to lead an organization through change. And then the fourth C is courage, because none of those other things really matter unless you take some risks and actually do something to move the change forward. And do what's right. Do it what's right legally, morally, and ethically, because if you make decisions that are grounded in things other than that, they're going to backfire on you and you're going to have another Enron on your hands.
I love it. And it's so simple. It's a very simple framework. Now, are you working with organizations still, or is it organizations, individuals? Like, what does your platform look like? Not platform. I guess that's not the best way to put it. Your portfolio.
Portfolio right now has been the people leading change, not necessarily the organizations leading change.
So it translates to individuals. I mean, everything you said was like, that's totally what you would be if you're going through change in any way, personal, relationship, work change, any of that kind of thing.
Right. And I think it took me a little bit of time to figure that out, because as I was starting out, I thought that advising on this communications framework and going into organizations and helping them poke holes in their plans, see what they're missing, what opportunities do they have, what are they doing right, keep doing it. That hasn't really panned out as much. And the more I talked with people, they said, write the book. So the book's coming. But it also dawned on me that I really enjoyed working more with the people. Like the thing that brought me the most joy over my career, and this is where that retrospective thinking and that quiet time really helped me think about this or realize it, was that the most joy was watching my team grow and develop and become the best human beings and professionals they could be, watching them move on to other jobs. And I never birthed children of my own. I have 2 stepchildren and a grandson, but I never birthed children of my own. And so that to me feels like the nurturing mother who helped them, become awesome.
Yes.
And as I thought more and more about that, people were telling me, you make a great coach. You've always been a great coach. So that's where the coaching came in. I think I had the aha somewhere in the middle of last year, Noelle, where I thought, you know what? The idea that organizations run themselves is not real. It's not well, until the machines take over, that's not happening. Right. People run organizations. And if any change is going to start, it always starts with you. You look in the mirror, it always starts with you. So if you're a leader taking an organization through change, you have to realize all of those things. You have to have clarity. You have to use those connections. You have to care. You have to have courage. So the coaching is really what's come of that. And so the leadership coaching and the mentoring, because I do some mentoring programs as well, have really been the place where I have seen the biggest impact for people.
I can only imagine, seriously, because you've had such a breadth of experience with so many different leaders too. Like, you know the different types of leadership style, so you know what you're working with. Mm-hmm. So the book is coming out. I usually ask people this at the end of like, what is coming up next for you? But it sounds like the book launch is going to be a pretty big deal. When is it coming out? Do you know what month-ish?
Yeah, I don't have a publication date for it.
Okay.
We went back and forth on editing, and now it's in my hands to finish. And so we're going to hit the publisher probably this week with that. So I'm guessing in a couple of months. But on my website, I have blogs about this entire framework. The framework is explained there. The other thing I want to mention about the framework is that if you think of the framework as a recipe, the 4 C's are the ingredients, the sugar, the flour, the milk, whatever. But unless you have the instructions, you don't really know how to make a cake with those ingredients or anything with those ingredients. So I have integrated into this framework what I call 12 principles of prosperity. Nice. And what they are 3 different behaviors aligned with each one of those 4 C's that tell you what exactly can I be doing differently in my life to help me move forward with the changes I want to make.
Oh, that's
And you
wonderful.
don't have to do all 12 all the time, but knowing what they are and applying those principles and those behaviors can really help you make a difference. And the reason I wanted to bring the two of those together is because I really wish that I had been able to have more influence over my older brother, to be able to share what I know and show him what I was doing so that I could achieve the success that I've been able to achieve. Now, either he didn't want to listen or I didn't want to do it, or we talked about, the next meal we were going to have together versus things of this nature. But I wasn't able to help him. Maybe I can help others.
I love that, Mary.
That's really the give back. The give back, as much as I say I want to give back knowledge, wisdom, and all that other stuff, the give back is, let me see if I can help some other people really achieve what they want to achieve, whether it's in business or in their personal lives. So that's the real why.
I love it. And you bring so much to the table. I mean, it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger for you until you decide you don't want to do it anymore, which of course we all have that choice too. Exactly. But I mean, you truly are, you're doing important work. And Mary Lou, first of all, thank you so much for being here with us, because this has been it's been beneficial for me to chat with you too, because I feel like our worlds aligned a lot. So some of the questions I hope didn't sound too from a personal place. Sometimes I want to hear what she has to say about this, because I know what I experienced. But thank you so, so much. And all of Mary Lou's links are going to be in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in the book that's coming out, in the 4 C's, all of that will be there. And just thank you for your time, Mary Lou. I know you don't probably have a lot of it, so I appreciate you being here with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Noelle. When we first started chatting, I literally wrote in my notes, I love her.
Oh, that's so sweet. I know we did to the audience. We kind of did. Listeners might think we had a little bit of extra time to chat it up, because truly, when I meet someone that, first of all, I know that you and I would have been great friends at work. You just automatically know.
I have a feeling you would have been among my favorite HR business partners to work with.
See, now that's a compliment. I like that. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Yeah. But Mary Lou, thanks again. Seriously. And we will keep in touch. We will. But I want to hear more and more about everything. And I'm looking for that book to come out, because I'm going to be first in line to get it.
Thank you very much. And again, I really appreciate your time and for this opportunity. It's been terrific. Thank you again.
Yes. Well, that's it for now. Until next time. Thank you for listening to The Change Effect. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode, so more women like you can find us and take their next step toward creating a life they love.